Hi friends, today I'm back with the review of this book. This is by Jagari Mukherjee, The Whole 9 Yards Stories. As you can see, this is a collection of short stories. It has a impressive cover. There are, as the name, it has like two meanings. There is one story which is like the whole 9 yards, and there are total 9 stories. So the 9 in this signifies both that story as well as the 9 stories inside. Um, so let us get into each of the stories. So they are like very short stories. Some of them are like pretty quick. Overall the book is like only 90 pages, so it's a short collection of 9 stories, each of them like hardly 8 to 10 pages. So these are all the 9 stories that are there. So the first story is about it's called The Only Solution, and it is about about a woman, Najma, who is now a 55-year-old widow, but she's about to meet a young girl called Hayat, and she is like sort of recollecting her past with Hayat, and how she met Hayat. She met through her husband, Asif. So she actually met Hayat's mother, Zahra, and Hayat when Hayat was like a small child. But then that story is about like what really happened later on with Nazma, Zahra, Asif, and why. Of course, the beginning line itself, it says that she's now a widow, so Asif has passed at some point. So what happened to Asif, and why Hayat wants to meet Nazma now, and why is Nazma thinking about what happened in the past. So that is all this story is about. Of course, it tells about the story of Nazma in her younger days, when Hayat was like a child, young child. But what is the interesting part of this story is like the twist that comes at the end, a revelation which Hayat tells Nazma at the end, which probably Nazma never knew. She had a different understanding of her life with Asif, and what happened to Asif and all of that. Hayat tells something at the end, which is like the high point of the story. So the next story is called The Model. So this story is about Nandini, who is who sort of tries to do modeling. She's already like a middle-aged person, unmarried woman, who is like taking care of her aging parents. But while she's doing this modeling, people whoever are trying to who hired her for the modeling, they keep telling her that she looks like a chic grandmother, though she's not that old. But as it happens with most women that after a certain age, they are just categorized in certain things, and that's how when she goes for modeling, though she is only in her 40s, people try to joke with her like that. But then it also tells about the backstory of Nandini, and her aging parents, what are their health issues, and how Nandini is looked at by her family members, probably more as a caregiver, and then at profession, how she is looked at as a model. It's a bit of a heartbreaking story. How her parents actually sort of, it sounds almost like pretty selfish, but then later on we understand that that is something she just couldn't avoid, or maybe she was herself not selfish enough to take care of herself, or prioritize her own life, or her happiness, or her profession, how she actually prioritizes her parents, and something that we always see in our society. So that is the story. it's sort of, a bit of uh, makes you feel very bad for her. So the next story is the actual, the title, the whole 9 yards. So in this story, it is like, see, it's also interesting that, not every story names the protagonist or, the characters. So this is one such one, like, where the woman, she is like, in her younger years, she doesn't really like, appreciate or really like wearing saris. That when you say 9 yards, it always means like, how saris being referred, right? I mean, that's how we generally refer to a sari. I mean, that's a good way of referring to a sari. And so she tries it like, multiple times to wear the sari herself, pleat it herself. But then, probably in her 20s and, in her younger years, she doesn't really like it much. But then gradually she likes it, the colors, the textures, the different sort of, cloth that is used for the sari, the fabrics, all of that. And then there is again a small twist at the end, that, how because she was not wearing sari, how she was judged a certain way. And probably, a decade later, how once she's wearing sari, people start complimenting her that she is very beautiful. But then, there is this pertinent question that does only a sari define, like, how a person looks, beautiful or not, especially when, someone is looking for a marriage alliance. Is it like only if you are wearing a sari are you desirable to the groom and, his family and his parents? So it has a very interesting message there. So the next one is this, the email. So this is again, see, all these stories are like centered around women. Most of the characters, the main characters are women, and of course there are some supporting male characters, but it's predominantly about women. So this fourth story is about Shalini, and, mostly more about her daughter Deepali. And then she gets an email from a person who is like, um, with whom she's being matched with. And then I mean, how does he look like, and, what happened earlier when, they were trying to bring up this match with Deepali. And then finally later on, what happened, and does she marry that guy? That guy's name is Sunil. So does she marry him, or does she prioritizes her life or her career or her profession? That is what the email is about. The next story is called The Dilemma. This is again about Chandrani and then Sanjoy. Okay. There is also one common thing. Most of the stories are like set in Kolkata, not all of them, but majority of them, there is a reference to Kolkata, and, a reference to the places in that. Um, so this is again about Chandrani, and, she gets this match of Sanjoy, who is from London, and she's like the only child, and she is skeptical about this match, because that means she has to move away from Kolkata to London, where Sanjoy is settled. And, what does she do? Like, she has this dilemma about whether she wants to get married to Sanjoy and move to London, or she is like pretty much attached to her parents and, the life that she has built herself in Kolkata. So that is the dilemma that she has. So the next story is Petunias. This is like personally my favorite. This again is about a woman who has been like recently had a separation from her husband, because he just leaves, and then out of her grief, and what she starts doing is she starts doing this online shopping, just buying things which she never bought, which probably even today she doesn't need, but she just tries to buy all this stuff and starts filling up her house, until one day her sister actually brings up some sort of a perspective, that why is she constantly doing this online shopping and buying things that a lot of what you call this FOMO, fear of missing out. So she looks at something online, and it says there is like low stock, there is only one item available, two items available, so hurry up. That's how the e-commerce websites sort of tempt you. Then they tempt you with a lot of um, savings options, or sort of discounts and all of that, but then at some point she starts sort of just buying things left, right, center, even those which she doesn't use. So her house is like filled up with all these cardboard boxes, and then unused items, bowls, candles, whatnot, like wall clocks. She just thinks they are looking good. She has the instant satisfaction and gratification when she buys them, but then are they really serving the purpose? Is she able to fill that hollow that is left behind by her husband? That's when her sister calls her, and her sister is not in this city, she is abroad. So she calls, and then that is when her sister tries to give her a certain perspective. Okay, so that is what this story is about, and probably that is something I think we all relate to at some point of this mad shopping rush that we are all feeling for online shopping on these e-commerce websites. I think all of us have experienced that at some point, but this story really just shows your mirror, and tells you what really is causing a lot of us to do this, and what we should probably do instead of this mad online shopping. So that definitely is like something that I could relate to the most, maybe. The next one is the rendezvous. So this is again something's like very similar to, so these stories actually, like there are two stories, or rather overall four stories, which are like other than the names, all the backdrop and the whole story is similar, but in each of the stories the characters take a different route. Okay, so this is a rendezvous, in which it's like Neelima, whom people call like Nelly, and she's actually trying to meet some person called Sandeep, who she was supposed to marry, or whom she met many years back, and then they don't marry, and then after I think 12 years they're again meeting, like what we saw in the earlier one more story. It's the circumstances are similar, but the author just contrasts, like in the same situation, in same circumstances, how different people behave differently. So Neelima's how her life and her decisions and her life route is different. Okay, so she meets this guy Sandeep. So this person is also like in England, and what did Neelima decide many years back, 12 years back, about getting married to Sandeep, and after all these years, why did they again meet up, and this time around what did she do, like what happened to Neelima and Sandeep in all these 12 years, and now why are they again meeting up, and this time around what did they decide to do. That is what this story is about. Then this is also a very interesting story, actually, the court marriage. So this is like at a time when there are a couple of these girls who are like in a living in a hostel, and they are studying, and one of them actually decides that she is in love with one of the her classmates, and then she goes and does a court marriage at the age of 19. Of course, like how people elope, and they just don't listen to parents at that age, and then they decide that this is the best decision. They are in love with a certain person, and then they try to justify that. And it's like the main character whoever is there, her friend actually does this marriage. The friend is Meeta. So this girl actually goes and she signs as one of the witness along with few other girls. So others are like they have their own opinion about this court marriage, like just two people signing, and then there are witnesses who are signing, and then it's marriage, and it's forever, sort of. Other girls have some opinion about the girl who is getting married, Meeta. But then our main character, she thinks that this is a sort of love, and this is how marriage is it meant to be, and this is like forever and all of that. But only later on she understands what happened to Meeta's life, and then there is a certain conclusion that this character arrives at, like what is marriage and what is love, and is there really a forever, and how things change, and probably comes to a conclusion that maybe change is the only constant. So this is a very interesting story. Like, you wouldn't think that is how the story progresses, but yeah, it starts somewhere and it ends again after like few decades, and you'll see how where all these characters end, all these girls who were friends once upon a time in their college days. Okay. So that is about the court marriage. Then this is the last story called the polka dotted butterfly. So again, this is about Sonia, who is like who is also going through like separation, and then she is like filing for a divorce from her husband, but she still lived in the apartment where they once both happily lived. So she's just trying to recollect all the happy moments, and that's when she's actually going through this transition of being happily married to probably being divorced, and going through this separation. That's when there is a butterfly which comes and sits on her dressing table every day, and it's interesting how the butterfly becomes a part of her life, and how she finds a certain companion in the butterfly, someone who listens to her, and so probably someone who is not judging her for her life decisions, or where how her life is progressing, and probably someone with whom she can actually share everything without being judged. So that is the last story, the ninth story. So overall, as I said, it's a collection of short stories, and they are pretty much short, all of them. And as I told you, some of them are like same circumstances, but then different characters, and how each character behaves differently, the different sort of decisions that are taken. So they are very short. So author actually tries to pull all the info, or a lot of whatever is the underlying message into those few pages and lines. So only mostly I can say the book will appeal more to women, especially women who have been through one of these situations in adulthood, about majorly about marriage and love and companionship, and how decision one decision that you make today may or may not be the best one, but then probably years later you should even not really look back it and be feeling guilty. Probably you should be taking it as a lesson and then move on and look at your next phase of life. So there is a lot of hidden meaning in all these stories. There is a hidden message. Some of them are like in the face, some of them are like a little subtle. So only if you are understanding the author's intentions and all, you will be able to catch what the author is trying to tell with all these stories. All of them are like relatable, at least one or the other out of all these stories are like something you may have faced or you may have seen in some of your family or friends. So they're short and not really sweet. They're a bit some of them are tragic, and they're actually more of lifelike and hard hitting in some ways. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you to pick it up and then just try to read how the real life stories are actually brought to life by the author very nicely. I hope you enjoy reading it. Thank you.